Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Zelda Kast, another podcast on the internet that talks about Zelda. I'm your host, Avi, and today I'm joined by my two co-hosts, the brave boy Zach's Quest and the wise guy Ken Lair. Today we are actually going to take a step away from the Zelda portion of our Another Zelda Cast and move towards the Zelda adjacent corner, or Zach for short, because joining us today is the man, the myth, the legend himself. He is single-handedly reviving the YouTube poop community with his new game that is available for all platforms: Steam, Switch, Xbox, PlayStation, what have you. Please give a warm welcome to Dopply.
Yeah, hey, my name's Seth Fulkerson, otherwise known as Dopply on the internet. And yeah, I'm the developer of Arzette. Thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here. We hope you can forgive us for the, shit show.
It's all good.
Let's
It's
just
all
be
good.
honest.
Man just showed us how a real introduction goes.
It is all good. Yes. Thank you for having me.
I'm sure it's a stark contrast from PAX.
PAX was fun. Had a really good time there. Lots of people came out, played the game, did an autograph signing, sold out of the Switch version that we had on hand. Did a really cool panel. It was a really good time. Got to see a lot of good friends. Got to see fans. It was really, really cool.
That's amazing.
That sounds real awesome.
How many people were there, do you think?
At PAX total,
Thousands.
thousands.
Of course at PAX total. But I mean, like, more towards Arzette. Like, how many people do you think you met on average?
A lot. At least over 100. So a
That
lot
is
of
fair.
people.
That is fair.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I didn't watch the panel itself. I meant to, but I got really busy. You said you were up there with Jeffrey Rath and I can't remember.
Gene Wilbur.
Probably Gene Wilbur, yes.
So the panel was hosted by Jared Petty. He works at Limited Run now, but he was at IGN and a lot of other media outlets. He's a great guy. But he hosted the panel, and I was joined by Seth Macy from IGN, Ash Said Hi, and Nadia Oxford. Just some really cool gaming historians and people who know what's up with the Zelda CD-I games. But we also had Rob Dunlavey up there, who worked on Arzette and also the Zelda CD-I games as one of the background painters and illustrators. So it was really cool to get his and it was really cool to get his input and sort of expertise that, like, obviously we have some of the story, but he was able to fill in a lot of the gaps. It was pretty awesome. But yeah, Bonnie Jean wasn't able to come to the panel. Bonnie Jean Wilbur and Jeffrey Rath and Rob were all at the autograph signing that we did earlier that day, which was very surreal. It was pretty crazy.
I would
but
imagine
we were able.
That sounds like a star-studded cast you got there, man.
Well, star-studded, I guess, if you love the Zelda CD-I games. But yeah, it's
up to interpretation.
Right. But we were able to get Jeffrey up there for a second. It was really cool. We basically were talking about like the YouTube poop inspiration part and like some of the quotes, and then we were like, hey, wouldn't it be better if we had the voice of Link himself to come up here and maybe say a few words? So that was really cool. Brought down the house. A lot of fun.
Nice. Is there anything else that happened at PAX that you want to mention?
Not really. Just had a really good time in general. Again, got to meet a lot of developers that I only talked to on the internet before. I got to meet Vinny Vinesauce in person, which is great because we'd been talking for a long time, and obviously he was in Arzette, so that was really cool. He had to field a lot of frog-related things. Yeah, he was a voice.
Oh, he was the frog?
He was the frog.
Wow. Okay. Now, all right. Learn something new every day.
But yeah, it was cool. I had a good time. It was very productive, and I'm tired.
Fair enough. I absolutely understand that. You also mentioned development a little bit, which kind of leads me into our next point.
Sure.
Before we jump into Arzette in general, let's learn a little bit about you. How did you get
Okay.
into game development?
So I had always been the type of person who, whenever I liked a book or if I watched a movie or anything like that, I wanted to kind of do it myself, and video games were no different. I have a lot of really awful design documents that I did as like a 12-year-old for like Metroid Fusion. Obviously, was one of my favorites as a kid, um, and I was in the middle of that span of time where there was no new Metroid game. So yeah, I designed my own. It was called Metroid Curie, I think, because I was just learning about
Oh,
nuclear
like Marie
physics and
Curie?
stuff. Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah, it was very dumb. But yeah, no. And then shortly after, decided to put down my ideas on paper. I started messing around with Game Maker, and back then it was like version 7. It was just a long, long time ago, well before they had any designs of doing like console releases and like more professional facing sort of things.
Okay.
But yeah, I cut my teeth on that, and it turned out to be an invaluable skill to start learning when you're like 12 years old, because you know I did a lot of like smaller game projects like on the side, like growing up, and like kind of game jam type stuff. Yeah, that's just sort of how I just self-taught myself how to do game dev.
All right. So you're
I
self-taught. You didn't like study anywhere or anything like
no,
that?
no.
That's
I
honestly
studied
really
graph.
impressive being able to learn about that stuff like on your own.
Yeah, Game Maker makes it a lot easier. Obviously, I studied some other like, and after a while, Game Maker has like a drag and drop like type program that you can start like sort of learning the basics of how like programming and how games like are put together and stuff. But there's a point where you're going to have to actually learn how to like code, and so it's really good at easing you into that and sort of learning like actual like programming paradigms and stuff. But yeah, no, I went to college for graphic design for a little while, so definitely nothing game development oriented. And
Gotcha.
then
I gotcha.
yeah, it was always something I wanted to do, but it was always something I did in like a hobbyist um, sort of way. I spent a very long time in the finance business and mortgage industry. It's my most of my background, most of my career was spent there. Um, until, well, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I had a really good opportunity and I decided to go for it and work on games full time, and eventually that became Arzette. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
that's
Honestly, it
sort of the
really is
trajectory.
amazing.
Yeah,
Sounds
no,
like
I
it really
got
paid
very
off.
lucky. Yeah, yeah. um, the um, the sort of like catalyst for all this, and I'm sure you had this as like a question, but was the Zelda CD-I remasters that I did in 2020
Yep, that was
that are
actually
released
the
in
next thing I was
2020.
going to talk about.
Right. Well, I'll let you go ahead and introduce those, and I'll jump back into the topic.
Right. Okay. So, all right, jumping ahead a little bit here. I was going to ask you about your early work and then lead into that, but let's just
It's
go
not.
ahead
It's
and
fine. You don't have to ask about the early work. Someday I might. Someday I might release like a compilation of some of my little small games, but they're pretty terrible. One of them is a Sonic the Hedgehog fan game where Sonic is made of crap. So yeah, maybe not like my finest work,
you
but
got to
work
start from somewhere,
nonetheless.
man. You got to start from
Right.
somewhere.
Yes.
Oh man, I don't think you understand. I'd probably pay like
I'm
$2 to
very
play
intrigued right now.
that.
Well, someday, maybe.
Someday. But like I said, I wanted to talk about your early work. Before RZ, you made it really, really clear that you knew exactly what you were doing whenever you remastered the CD-I Zelda games. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So that project came about because I was on talking with some friends as we did on the internet. It was around the time that Twilight Princess HD either got announced or released. I can't remember the difference, but basically, the joke was, what if they did that, but like, for the Faces of Evil and Wand of Gamelon, right? So, um, I had always had a soft spot for the games, and by soft spot I mean I was into the memes, right?
Oh, of
And
course.
my friends were too. And most of us were involved in that community in one way or the other, like the YouTube poop thing. So it was something that was always very near and dear to us. Um, and yeah, it was basically just a joke. And as a creative person, I struggled, sometimes still struggle, with finishing projects, right? Like seeing things through. So it seemed like it seemed like an easy enough like project to complete, like sort of like scope out and do like, hey, let's remake these games, but like make them better, which sounds like, oh, that's not. By the way, all game development is extremely difficult. If anyone tells you otherwise, they don't know what they're talking about. But
I would imagine so, yes.
yep, yes, a great way to find out that you don't know what you're doing is by doing a project like this right away. So yeah, I started on that project, and I've told this a few other places, but it's a fun little wrinkle to the story. I got a few months into that, and I was like, well, I'm not doing this. This is stupid. And I actually like stopped the project for a long time. Actually, I tell people that it took 4 years, but it was probably closer to 2, just kind of with a hiatus in between. Because at one point, I realized the amount of work that needed to be done to actually like do these games like correctly. And I was like, well, there's no point in doing this because nobody cares. This is a worthless project. Um, so I actually got started with a friend because I learned a lot even from doing just that little bit on a indie project that was unrelated to those games. But unfortunately, that didn't turn out well at all, and was sort of like kind of a sore spot for me. It almost made me want to quit game development altogether because it just, sometimes it doesn't work out when you try to work with somebody on a project.
Yeah, sometimes
So
shit happens. We can attest to that. Even we can absolutely attest to that sort of thing.
right. So I, was feeling pretty dejected, and then I was like, well, you know what? I want to actually finish those projects. I want to do this. Like, even if it's like the dumbest thing I ever do, I want to finish these projects. And uh, sort of in the process of doing them, I kind of learned the story behind them. Hardcore Gamer 101 has a really, really good behind the scenes interview with Dale Descheron, the director of the Zelda CD-I Games, and a bunch of other really great games, including Below the Root for Commodore 64, which was pretty much the first Metroidvania ever. So really interesting development legacy that man had. Unfortunately, Dale passed away in 2008. Otherwise, I would definitely have wanted to talk to him, but I have spoken to some members of his family, so um, but
Cool.
regardless, yeah, I sort of learned like how terrible like it was to make the games, like how difficult like the process was for them. Like they had no money. They were trying to make, a Zelda game on a system that was not made to play video games. They had game designers obviously, and they had like but they had a lot of limitations they had to adhere to, like they had to have animation. They had to have like the backgrounds be detailed the way they were, and they had to have CD quality audio. Like these were all like mandates that Philips like put them on, and it just it didn't work out. They didn't have the resources, the time. Obviously, they for the animation they ended up partnering with Russians because it was like the Iron Curtain had just fallen, like Soviet Union had just sort of like collapsed, and so there was like opportunities for Americans to sort of go into business with Russians. So an opportunity sort of like arose with Dale, um, and so they were able to get that going, but that was their solution, was to the animation, was to fly in a bunch of Russian animators, put them in a Boston apartment, and be like, well, try to animate like Disney. Do your best. Good luck. And that's that's like sort of that's how those games came to be. And I don't know. I was just really
That's
fascinated and
fascinating.
sort of
Honestly, that really is.
right. Like, and of course, there's the whole side of like they exist because of a failed deal with Philips and a failed deal with Sony and all that stuff. But
Right, right.
they're very much like they're fascinating aberrations for sure. But yeah, and so I was super fascinated by this story, and I was like really like, well, what if these games had a chance to be polished up and be released on something that wasn't, you know, I'm not going to say a VCR player, but uh, like basically something not for video games, right? Like what if
Something a bit
you
more modern.
polished it up, right?
If they had a
So
chance at like maybe a modern gaming console, or even just a gaming console in general that's able to handle that sort of stuff.
exactly. So I had a lot of motivation in that sense, and also I can be very stubborn. And I wanted to see it through. So after a lot of work, a lot of work, and kind of I had like one person who tested it for me. He was a close friend who also did a lot of like the tweaking on the graphical assets for the games. He's like he might be more of a CDI diehard than me. Like he might actually be like that tuned in. I found the only other person on the planet I think who's that into it, and he sort of like tested it for me, and he's a good friend, of course.
Good.
And yeah, I released them. I thought a dozen people would care, my weirdo friends, and because who cares? Who cares about the Zelda CD-I games, right? Like everyone hates these games. The fact that somebody would like do those is like, well, that's idiotic. Why would you spend that much time doing that? It's a waste of your life, right?
Some would call that borderline
You'd be surprised.
masochistic.
You'd be
And
surprised how
yeah,
many
well,
people play it for the meme.
I was very, was very surprised because the reaction was sort of overwhelming. Uh, Obviously, I took the games down because I was like, well, this is, you know, this might look funny to certain rights holders. So I decided to take it down because it got a significant amount of attention. And no, Nintendo has never, ever, ever sent me a DMCA or anything along those lines or communicated about those games whatsoever. But I do have a good working
I was
relationship with
wondering about that
Nintendo.
actually.
I was gonna say, were they eyeing you?
No, we work together well, and I mean Arzette's on Switch, so
That's true. That is
they
very
know all
true.
about me. They posted about the
That was
game on their
interesting as
Indie
well.
account. Yeah, yeah,
I
no,
was kind of surprised Nintendo because then that's kind of Nintendo somewhat for the first time in who knows how long acknowledging the CD because you can't tell me that Nintendo did not recognize at least a little bit what they were. So that's technically in like the most side eye, like as much as they can get away with it, recognition that those games existed. Like it's very interesting.
I can't comment on what Nintendo thinks or doesn't think, but I will say that they are very friendly with me and we're very cooperative with Arzette. So I don't know. I don't know what they think regarding that kind of thing, but yeah. So that's sort of the story of the CDI remasters they released. People cared about them a lot more than I thought they would, and so my friends and I, it's the same weirdo of friends, had sort of always we had talked a little bit about doing our own sort of CDI style game. Way before I did the remasters, because turns out a lot of them turned into either professional animators or artists. Well, I've got a lot of talented friends. I'm very lucky. I'm a schmo, but whatever. Um,
Oh,
and
don't give yourself some credit. Come on, man.
I'll give a little bit of credit. The game is pretty good, but yeah. And so we'd been kicking that idea around for a little bit, and after that, I was like, okay, I need to get serious about this. This might actually be something worth pursuing. This might be an idea that insane as it sounds, doing a spiritual successor to these games sounds like something an unwell person would pursue. But I was like, well, I think the time is right. So yeah, that's sort of how Arzette kind of got started. I didn't know if you wanted to go into your next question or how you
So
wanted
the
to go about it.
so
Yep,
the remastered CD-I games did lay a solid groundwork for the development of Arzette, right?
I would say
Is that what
so.
I'm picking up
Yes,
from that?
right.
Yeah,
Like I would say that if they didn't exist, Arzette probably wouldn't exist.
that is fair. That is honestly fair. It's kind of funny that you mentioned that like this entire time I think a lot of people are thinking that, it was Nintendo that reached out to you to hand you that DMCA and say, "Hey, you can't do this anymore." I never would have expected that it was you that actually took it down.
Yeah, no, like I said, I have a background in business, finance, mortgages, lots of things like that. I have a background in professionalism, I guess you could say, and
That is fair.
you
That is
know,
fair.
I could say that if I wanted to turn into a professional game developer, which I did, I was like, well, I shouldn't leave these up, so I took them down. But no,
And
they've never ever approached me. Yeah.
it's funny because like before you shared that information with us, I was thinking that the whole story was, you know, Nintendo made you take down the games, and then Arzette was made out of spite of that.
No, absolutely not. No.
Like, screw you, you can't tell me what to do.
The things we imagine when we don't know the story.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting a lot of stuff cleared up here, and I'm really appreciative of that. I
Course.
am loving this so far. Before we jump back into, well, before we jump over to Arzette, guess I should say, it's very clear that you're a big fan of Zelda.
Yep.
So, how did you get into it?
The Zelda series.
The Zelda series
Um,
in general. I mean, this is primarily a Zelda show, so
yeah. So my first exposure was Zelda CD-I. No, I'm just kidding. Um,
could you
no.
imagine though?
Oh, I'm sure some. Well, actually, I've gotten many comments from people that said it was their first Zelda game. So,
Fair
since
enough,
so
fair enough. I mean,
it's not that far fetched if you can believe it.
well, I mean, to each their own, obviously.
Right. Anyway, think my very first like introduction was my cousins very close to me, and they were the ones who were super super into video games. And they like sort of pulled together. They were a couple years older than me, and they like pulled together a lot of their money, and they had like an NES, a SNES, a PlayStation. They they would sort of like be like, instead of giving each of us like a gift or whatever, their parents would give them like a console collectively to all of them, because that was their thing, was video games.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So which is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but like that's sort of how I got into games like in general, like because they gave me like a hand-me-down SNES in like the early 2000s, and I had no idea the SNES was old. So like I sort of like did it all backwards, I guess you could say. But no, they had an N64, and they had, I think I saw Majora's Mask first. It must have been like 2000,
Solid
and
title.
I was super into it. Unfortunately, uh, I can't remember how old I was. I think I was like 8 then. My parents, for whatever reason, were like, "Well, Zelda's like a very violent franchise. You can't have that at home. That's
Oh
too
boy.
violent." Mario is fine. A couple others were fine. Zelda, not fine. I don't know why this was,
Oh, come on.
but
I'd say Mario is worse. You're stomping the life out of these poor creatures.
Yeah, you're stomping, you're hitting them with fireballs, you're dropping them into lava. In
so,
Zelda, it's very cut and dry. You hit them with sword.
Literally cut and dry.
I'd always been intrigued by Majora's Mask, but it wasn't until 2004 when the hype train started for Twilight Princess, that I was like, well, I got to get in on this, right? Like, this looks so cool. Zelda seems like an awesome franchise, right? And I had a GameCube by that point. Um, And
Was that your first official Zelda game that you played?
no.
No. What did
I
you say? It's your
got
favorite?
no.
No.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good, but no. Um, I'll get into that here in a second.
I can already
So,
hear Ken seething.
so I got Wind Waker because I had a GameCube and I wanted to get into Zelda. So that was really the first Zelda game that I like actually played through was Wind Waker, which, I guess in
That is
retrospect,
also
not a
fair.
terrible,
Yeah,
That's
that's a good
solid.
one.
yeah, not a terrible place to start, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
it's
not at all.
a little easier. It's a little shorter. Like the dungeons are pretty like small or whatever. And I still really like Wind Waker. I definitely think it has a few issues here and there, but it is definitely one of my favorites
Triforce
still.
pieces, anyone?
Exactly. Uh, but I was super into it, and I was like, "Wow, Zelda's great!" And so I was still really excited for Twilight Princess.
As it should
Um,
be.
so I got the collector's edition disc because I live around a lot of secondhand shops, and back then it was very cheap to get the collector's edition. And I was like, well, I had been on the internet enough at that point, even though it was like early internet. I read magazines. I knew that Twilight Princess was supposed to be like the successor to Ocarina of Time, right? Like that was sort of like how it was being presented. Like, oh, it's like the same.
Yeah, they
Uh,
were trying to fix backlash from the Wind Waker art style.
exactly right, exactly. They're trying to fix that backlash, and of course, how old was I? Like
I'm gonna have
13,
to. If you
14. I
still
was like,
have that, I'm gonna have to see that collector's edition disc at one point. If you
yeah, no,
happen to if you still have that,
oh,
you'd be making my
yeah,
dream come true right now. Sorry,
oh
Twilight
yeah.
Princess fanatic. I'm Zelda fanatic in general, but Twilight Princess is my Wind Waker. Uh,
No,
I have to see that.
I didn't even
yeah,
realize they
no.
had a collector's
I
edition.
knew, but there were so few.
Oh, I'm talking about, I'm talking about the compilation, right? Like the Zelda Collector's
Oh,
Edition on
okay.
GameCube.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what
You
it's
have that.
called.
Oh, the one
Oh,
that has
okay.
the
I was
first,
gonna say
or like one of, yeah. Okay,
that
okay.
I have. Okay,
That
so there
one.
was a I guess wise guy moment here. There was a little like special Twilight Princess release where you could get a steelbook copy of Twilight Princess, which steelbook back then in 2006 was kind of crazy,
No
especially for a
way.
Wii. Yeah, I think there's still one for
Really?
sale on eBay for like $4,000. It might,
Well,
unless it's been gone, but it's been there for like a while.
well, that's very exciting.
There is
Wow,
absolutely no way.
that's
Oh,
really
I'm
cool.
trying to see if it's still
I
up. I think
believe
it
it.
is.
No, I don't own that, but I sure would like to.
Oh
Um,
my god, it's
It looks
real.
like the Wii version is not for sale. It was up for a while. It was 4,000, but I can see the GameCube one right here actually. The Wii version was the better one. I think it was the better one. But yeah, they did have Steelbook exclusives.
yeah, I guess finishing up my story was so yeah, Wind Waker was my first, and so then I got the Zelda Collector's Edition like compilation disc, right? Not the one that had Master Quest. It was the one that had Majora's Mask too. So I was finally able to play through that. I was able to play through Ocarina of Time for the first time. Um,
Very nice.
and yes, and so the problem was I was really excited for Twilight Princess, right? So I was like, well, I'll play Ocarina first, and yeah, apologies, but obviously Ocarina is on a good day. It's my favorite Zelda game. It goes toe to toe with Link to the Past for me. It's either one of the two. And yeah, no, it became one of my favorite games ever. And I was like, well, this is like I can just pack it up, right? Like I played the best Zelda game. It's over. But I was still excited for Twilight Princess, but it was it didn't really meet my hype very much, unfortunately, compared to how like amazed I was at how good Ocarina of Time was. I was basically getting the 1998 experience like 8 years later, and I was like, wow, this is the best thing I've ever played.
It's
You
okay.
know, and then
We can have discussions later.
I mean, I like Twilight
Oh boy.
Princess, and I have really fond memories of my friend getting the Wii at launch and getting Twilight Princess at launch, and it was a fond memory. But also, you know, spending
It is
like
hard to
one
beat Ocarina of Time.
1 to 2 a.m. still in the tutorial section and being like, when am I gonna get to play this game? But um, yeah, no, I still really
Yeah, you
like
know what?
Twilight
That is
Princess.
fair. Twilight
It is
Princess
very
is a
fair.
long ass tutorial.
It takes a little bit. It is a meaty game. I still think it's probably the meatiest Zelda game. Like, how many dungeons does it have? Like 12?
9.
An
If
excessive
you
amount.
but if you do count the trials of what is it? I was about to say Trials of Osiris. This is not Destiny. The Cave of Ordeals. Yeah, it's like 10
Even more
dungeons.
deals.
Yeah, it's a huge number. Still much more than any other Zelda game, and it's I mean, even now it's huge, right?
It's a
And they're
huge
great,
game.
and they're great dungeons. Like they're really good. Um, but I definitely think Twilight Princess for me, obviously I like played through like all the games shortly after that. You know, the full Zelda
As
Monty.
you should.
Right
You had
after
your Zelda era.
at about at about that point. But around then was sort of, to me, I was like, well, what are we gonna do after Twilight Princess? Because I feel like this is the apex of the 3D Zelda formula. Like, right? Like it's they all these dungeons are very good. The bosses are good. It's a good story. There's so many items. The dungeons are huge too. I'm like, what are we gonna do after this? And well, I
Skyward
think
Sword.
we know. Yeah, I think we know what happened after that. So
A
I saw
long game, Skyward Sword.
I saw kind of the cracks myself personally around that time, like in the formula, like Nintendo spinning their wheels and kind of being like, well, what are we gonna do next, sort of thing. I really think a lot of that started with Twilight Princess. Like,
Mhm.
Well, I mean, how do you
uh,
follow up a game like that? You
It's
know?
hard to follow Twilight Princess up when you're looking purely at like design and mechanics and all that jazz, dungeon design, like Dopply was saying. That's a really hard follow up. Twilight
yeah,
Princess at that time was the highest selling Zelda game.
yeah. I mean, it was a super hard act to follow, and yeah, uh, you know, I do love the new Zelda games, of course, but I guess because I'm, you know, over the age
Oh,
of 30, I still
don't
have
even get the
a
wise
love.
guy over here started on Tears of the Kingdom. Don't even do it.
I won't. I won't. I'll refrain.
But yeah, that's my Zelda story. I'm a huge fan of the franchise. Obviously, I've played all of them. My favorite,
That's amazing.
yeah, it's either Ocarina or Link to the Past. Link to the Past is
Both very
so
solid
good.
choices.
It's so good, right? Like you play a game forever. Ocarina,
A Link to the
I understand people's like weird thing with it, with how it's very I don't want to say linear, but like you have to wait for a lot of cutscenes before you can like do anything in that game. It's not quite as you're not really getting into the action as much as like Link to the Past or some of the other 2D games.
That's the problem that Aaron Hansen had with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Having to press A at all the right places.
No, Link to the Past is a really good choice.
Well,
I'd
Aaron
say
likes
Link to the
Arzette,
Past
so
goes. Oh, go for it.
yeah, Aaron likes Arzette, so I have nothing to say against Aaron. He's a great man. Thank you for playing
Oh
Arzette.
no, love them, love them. My wife and I are longtime Game Grumps fans, so you can imagine our excitement whenever Arzette popped up on our feed for them.
It was crazy, yeah.
Speaking of Arzette, though, why don't we shift over to the main event?
Sure.
All right, so first question out of my long list of questions. What inspired you to create Arzette? Was it just like the CD-I games in general, or did you have sort of a preliminary idea that just kind of gravitated towards CDI games or the CDI style?
Yeah, so like I'd been wanting to make an original project for a long time. I thought that the idea of doing like a spiritual successor was both, you know, there's inherently something new and crazy about doing that. But also really fun. There's a lot of opportunities to really have fun doing something like that. And I had the right group of people in my life, the right group of artists, the right group of professional animators and amateur animators that I like sort of talked to them about doing that as an idea, and they were very, very receptive and encouraged me. So there's a lot along those lines. But yeah, just especially the reception, the Zelda CD-I like remasters, and I sort of touched on it earlier, but really just the potential, right, of like those games, like of the Zelda CD-I games. Like, what if they could be good? It's a stupid idea, but it's also like it really alluring. Like, there's really something about it that I felt I could do, because not only just the CDI, but um, like I sort of talked about earlier. Well, maybe I didn't, but I've said it many, many times in many other interviews and podcasts. I love bad games. I love bad games and underloved games, because every game has its story. As I was talking about the Zelda CDI story, nobody sets out to make a bad game. Games are the products of the circumstances that led to them. So you know, um, I loved that era of CD-ROM gaming, multimedia. Like, I like the 3DO, the CDI. Like, they wanted to go to the future, but they wanted to go there too soon. Like, they had all these things that they wanted to do in this era, like all the voice acting, the Red Book audio, the full motion video, amazingly detailed backgrounds, way more space for more stuff. Like, just there's a lot of like blue sky potential, I would say, in the CD-ROM era, that just because of limitations or just because of misguidedness on the part of just what people wanted to do with the technology at the time, it just really never panned out really well, except for like, two or three examples like Mist, Seventh Guest, and like a few other like things along those lines. Like, it never really panned out, unfortunately. And so the idea of like doing an homage to the Zelda CD-I games, an homage to that era of gaming, and just sort of like, what if it was done right? It was given the care and love that it deserves with, modern technology. Maybe we could be cooking here, maybe we have something.
And Cook, you
So,
did. The game is
yeah.
oozing with charm.
Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, that's just sort of what drew me to doing the project. Um, and, you know, um, in January of 2021, I publicly announced that I was going to be making a spiritual successor to the Zelda CD-I games, or yeah, that's pretty much what I said. Um, because I had been talking to some of the people in like the CDI like communities, like World of CDI, and some of those, and unfortunately, they sort of like announced it before I was ready to talk about it. And so I decided,
Yeah.
so they kind of jumped the gun. And so I was just like, yeah, I'm working on this. I'm going to, start recruiting some people. And, in my mind at that time, I was like, I'll probably do this on the side for a really long time, and or probably a Kickstarter along the lines, something like that. Um, a few weeks after well, it might not even been that long, a few days after maybe, that I announced that I was going to do a spiritual successor, um, Audie Surley from Digital Foundry, and also he was with another company at the time. He's a producer in the games industry, a business development person. He's also been a writer for many websites. He's been around the industry for a really long time, like over 2 decades. So he has a lot of experience, and he's also a CDI mega freak, and was really into my remasters. He reached out to me, and he, introduced himself. And I already knew who he was, because I'm a huge fan of Digital Foundry. And I was like, yeah, hey, this is what I'm doing. And he was like, is that, you doing your own IP? You doing your own thing? It's like, yeah. And he's like, well, I'm a producer in the games industry. And I was like, okay. And sort of from there, it turned into like an impromptu pitch meeting. And we also figured out we were both the same kind of weirdo, and became very, very good friends, like almost immediately. And we decided, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to make this project into something that is going to be like a game, a real game. like a professional project. So
Wow. So the CDI remasters were gaining you a lot of notoriety or attention or something
yeah,
along
I
those
mean, I
lines at
guess
the
you,
very least. People
right,
were kind of familiar with you at that point.
right, which is still surreal, like especially now that people want like pictures and stuff with me. I'm still not very used to that. Um,
Which I'm
but
sure
yeah,
it's I'm sure that's quite an experience in and of itself.
yes, very much so. I'm very flattered that so many people love Arzette the way they do, the way that I love it. So it means a lot. So we started talking. I was working on what would become Arzette in my spare time, pretty much. I was still with my previous job, my previous career at the time, and so Arzette was just something I did on the side, just like the CDI remasters were for a very long time. I had a lot of the design planned at that point in 2021. I even did some early play tests, early, because I was very keen on making sure that Arzette's not a joke game, right? Like this is, I'm, I spent
Actual
years,
serious legitimate game.
right? I spent years of my life on this, and I knew I was going to. So, I was. This is. I tried to make a good game. I think I succeeded, but to each their own. But
I absolutely would say so. I mean, you've got content creators like, the Game Grumps, Vine Sauce, Electronic Playground, like you were talking in the server, that exposed it to a wider audience. And once again, the YouTube poop community have latched onto it like, you know, flies to poop.
which is which is very gratifying because again, that's where I come from, right? That's where a lot of this all came from. And I never like set out with like the intention of, well, this is going to be fodder for them, right? I'm going to like because that was one thing that Audie and I both agreed on and why we got along so well was this Arzette had to become a sincere game. It was an homage, it was a love letter, but it could not be a parody. It could not be cynical. It could not wink at the audience and it could not like pander in a way that like would drive people like me being like, "Oh no, I'll have them like I want them to make videos," right? Like that was never something that I wanted to do. Was never on my mind. Like in my mind, I wanted to make what I think Animation Magic would have done if they had like a better like console, or like better hardware, like and then they got an opportunity to make like a third game, a third like CDI style game, but without the license. Like that was always what Artzat was to me, and it was to everybody else on the team too. Like nobody that worked on it like and I made sure that nobody that worked on it like was like making fun of it, like because that would totally defeat the purpose, because people can tell when you make something that is like mean spirited or like doesn't have the love put into it. And so it was important to me that this was and it was a really good production, like for the most part, like everybody
It's very
understood the
clear that
assignment. Yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
no, go ahead,
It's
go ahead,
very
go ahead.
clear that you put a lot of love and a lot of heart into this product. It really does show. Like, if you were just
Yeah.
lax on it or anything like that, it would very clearly show. But it's like the attention to detail is,
Probably
next level.
excessive.
It's out of
Yeah.
this world,
Yes.
honestly. And I think that's one of the things that plays up to like the strong suits of Arzette itself.
Right. I would agree. All that was very like all the attention to detail. Like I would obviously question myself sometimes, just like the CDI remasters. Like, what am I doing? Like, what I am pouring a lot of my life and love into this, but it. I was happy to do it. And I got a little ahead of myself, but basically, for a year. I was working on it part time. And then in 2022, that's when Adi and I got very serious about it. We were putting together a pitch demo, vertical slices that we were going to go around and we pitched to people. Um, the reaction from most publishers is exactly what you would think. If you go into somebody, if you walk up to a publisher and you're like, they're very polite about it, but most of them are going to be like, please don't ever like talk to me again. This is the word, like obviously, if you're trying to pitch Zelda CD-I but good, most people are not going to understand why you would even try to have the nerve to like walk into their building, right?
Right.
So, at a certain point, we decided that instead of just doing a publisher deal, we were going to do a Kickstarter, right? We're like, well, this is just going to have to be kickstarted, which I had a pretty like I felt pretty good about doing that. I felt like I would be able to make probably probably 20% of what Arzette ended up being, like in terms of like the amount of cutscenes and art and the amount of game that is there. Like I knew that I could probably do that. Um, so as part of the Kickstarter, we were going to do a physical version, as most Kickstarters do. And to do that, I was able to get a meeting at Limited Run Games because Audie had switched career like jobs. He had started working at Limited Run, where he still is as a producer, and so he's able to get me a meeting with Josh to be like, hey, pitch the game, like do with the physicals. So we ran through the vertical slice of the game, which was very early, but it's basically what Arzette ended up being. Like the character running around in a painted background with cutscenes, right? We had some really really early cutscenes, and Josh, he saw probably like 2 minutes of this demo. He saw the cutscene of the shopkeeper. It was really really early. He wasn't Mortar yet, but he looked kind of similar. We'll have a picture of him in the art book, by the way, what this guy looked like. He was voiced by me, but Josh saw this and he recognized immediately like what I was doing. He was like, "This is Zelda CD-I, right? Like this is what you're doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do that, but good." And he was like, "Why don't we just publish this? Like let's publish it because Limited Run has for a while they've been wanting to get more into doing original productions, which Arzette is, and this fit the bill. And they're the publisher, they're the partner of the game, and they've been awesome. I honestly could not
Honestly,
imagine
really,
anyone else
wow.
doing. Yeah, I couldn't imagine anyone else doing Arzette at this point because they get it. They get it in a way that a lot of other publishers probably would not have, and they've supported it in a way that a lot of publishers would not have. And they did take a risk. Josh took a risk on me. They took it because I was first time commercial developer. I had a lot to prove, but it's a success. I will say Arzette is a success, and it turned out
A
really well.
resounding success.
Yeah, and yeah, that's basically the story of how it came to be. Shortly after that, that's when the game entered like full production. We started working on it till its release. Basically, I assembled a team, all my friends, a few more animators who again are CDI weirdos. Like I would usually like start the conversation with, "Are you familiar with this?" And it's like, "Okay, do you like this?" And then and then most of the time, a lot of them would be like, "I have been wanting to do something like this my entire life." So that was
And that was your
really
opportunity.
cool, right? And Arzette was that kind of game for almost everybody that worked on it. Was this is our chance to make something like what the game is, right? Like good-hearted but just really goofy and just really go all out with like embracing its inspirations while trying to sand over the parts that aren't so good, but
Honestly, I
from
really
those
do
original
feel
games.
like, as far as the concept of Zelda CDI but good, I feel like that idea has been weighing on a lot of people's minds, especially in the Zelda community, because the games are not fun to play.
No,
They
the
are
original games absolutely
the
not,
original
no.
games, absolutely not. No, I never got the chance to play the remastered versions myself, though I want to
They're a little
just kind of
better.
experience it.
I'm a little biased, but
Um,
they're a little better.
oh, of course, of course. um, but yeah, I think. I mean, it's very clear. You were the one who took that idea and just ran with it. You just, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, man. You rock. You rock.
Oh, thank you. I don't know
You
about
saw
all that.
something that could be improved, and you took that and said yes.
I mean, yeah, more
Like
or
a lot
less.
of
That
people,
was the process.
I'm sure, talked about doing it. You just did it.
Well, we've already proven that I might not be well, considering my previous projects and now this one. So who knows? Maybe nobody else just had the wherewithal
gumption.
to be like, yes, the gumption, we may say, to be like, no, we'll do this. But I did it, and it's out
I
on
think that's
everything.
incredible.
Yeah.
So, what was your favorite thing about the production of Arzette?
My favorite thing, I think when I saw it come together in work, which was probably the fall, like when not Goldmaster time, but before that, probably the summer before that, when we were cutting the trailer, when we revealed the game last year at LRG3, which, by the way, the most nervous I think I'd ever been in my life. To finally, because I had kept such a tight lid on it, and everybody had, just to revealing this thing to the world and seeing what they would think, if they would take to it, or if they would hate it, or if they, oh, this guy's trying too hard, like all
Of
those
course,
anxieties, right?
I would imagine that would be nerve wracking for you.
Right. But when around that time we were cutting that trailer, and I was getting finished cutscenes and finished like background artwork, and just seeing the game like work, like that it had been done, like around that time, that I had pulled it off, that we had all sort of pulled it off, like that sort of feeling was very, very, very gratifying. Around that time I was talking to a friend. It was shortly before we revealed the game, and we hadn't talked in a little bit, and he was like, "Well, what's this game you're working on?" So I decided to show. I didn't tell him anything about the game. I just showed him a screenshot. It was like a screenshot of ours. It's the one that's in the it's on all the press stuff, which is the one with her at the building with the blacksmith and the alchemist. And he looked at it and he goes, "Is this what the hell is this? Is this like Zelda CD-I?" And the fact that he said that, and I had told him nothing about like that I had done the remasters, that I had done, that this was the game I was working on. He just immediately saw that and was like, "Is this Zelda CD-I? Like, what is this?" Like, I kind of knew. I knew from that point. I was like, okay, I think I might have pulled it off. I think we might have done it.
That's awesome, man. That really is awesome. It's very recognizable. Like, just if you were to take like a passing glance at Arzette, you would absolutely be able to make the connection between the dots, even if you knew nothing about the history behind it. You can very clearly see the inspiration.
It's a weird looking game. I mean, especially compared to a lot of other games out there, it is a weird looking game. I mean, at PAX, people will, like, even people who somehow had not heard about it, which was a lot of more people than you'd think. They would like walk by and they'd be like, they'd point at it, be like, what is that? Especially like when a cutscene started, they'd be like, what is that? Is that what I think it is? And then, you know, typically if they played, they'd laugh, they'd have a good time, because Arzette does have comedy in it, which is another thing that I was insecure about for a little bit. Thankfully, I had my co-writer Audie, who's very funny. We have the very, very similar sense of humor, who helped me on the script. But Arzette, for the most part, is written by me. Like all the cutscenes and characters and all that stuff. That's me with Audie's help, of course. But like, so it's in a lot of ways, you're putting yourself out there. Like, well, are people gonna think this is funny? Like, are they gonna like react to this? And so, it's very gratifying to see people like laugh at the stupid cutscenes that you have written. And the animators really like brought it to life too. Like, um, they were basically given the same directive that the original Zelda CD-I staff were, which was outside of a few select scenes that have storyboards, most of them were all boarded by the animators themselves, based on the script and my general direction. But I gave them a lot of artistic freedom to be creative and be like, do what you want. Like the Zelda CDI style. There's like a house style, of course. Like there's a certain resolution, colors, all that kind of frame rate and stuff that you have to hit in order to sort of like make sure that the look is hit. But as far as like staging and everything else, a lot of them were given free reign, and they loved it. Like they totally killed it. Like they made everything. It was just such a fun game to work on because between that and just the voice acting sessions, which were so fun, because
we'll definitely
we
have to get
did.
into that.
Yeah, we had a lot of professional voiceover talent, and just that were used to doing more dramatic stuff, or they a lot of times they were told, because this was I also had a professional voice director with me as well. Like they're used to being told, don't be cartoony, don't do this, and just to be able to let loose, I just was so it was a really fun time to really be able to just embrace like a lot of things that people tell you that you shouldn't embrace. I guess you could say it was very freeing in that way that I think a lot of productions aren't allowed to be. So it was
If you
just a
ask
fun game to
me,
work on.
if you ask me, Arzette feels like a breath of fresh air in a time where all AAA games are just like, you know what I'm trying to say, right? Like how everything's, filled with microtransactions, subpar story, just like the gaming market itself as of right now is so oversaturated. And then you have Arzette come along. Literally, it's like
Yeah.
taking a break from all that. It's pure gameplay. That's all
Right.
it is. Pure gameplay, great story, not like any of the schlock that you have put out nowadays, I'll tell you that.
It's games like these in this day and age that show what people really care about, and it's actually something me, Avi, and his wife were talking about like a few days ago, actually, with our little project, where passion is probably one of the most important things you could do with anything. Like it is easily one of the most important aspects of anything somebody creates. Passion is going to bring, even if you have the smallest of teams or the smallest ideas, or whatever the case may be, passion is going to make that something incredible. And obviously, at least from what I've heard the last hour and a half we've been talking about this, you seem very passionate about projects such as these. You could really, when you are passionate about something, you could really take and run with it, and it becomes something way bigger than you'd ever expect.
Yeah, Ken can absolutely attest to that too. I mean, he wrote how many chapters of a damn Zelda fan fiction story?
I am at.
What are you, 180 something?
I actually recounted. It's 196 right now. A million
Holy
words. And Avi has read it. It's very professional. But I mean, I didn't start off like that. I started off not knowing how to write or how to tell stories, how to write. But purely out of passion, just because I was dissatisfied with the Breath of the Wild story. It was still really good. And I could see what was there. Kind of similar, Dopply, how you saw the CD-I games. You could see something's there. You can see what's there. And you just want to refreshen it. And that's what I started doing until it became like very much an original story. And I just improved, and it just got crazy good. And now I just love writing as in a general, thing. I like writing stories. I like taking bad stories and fixing them to be let me not say bad stories. That's mean. Taking stories that didn't have the chance that they needed and turning them into something a lot better. And just character design, character themes, character arcs, changes, stuff like that. It's so fascinating to me. I'm so passionate about it, to where now I'm in this position. Specifically, I'm in, this podcast and talking to you, Dopply, and Avi, and meeting all these voice actors and, writing books and all that. That is something that purely started off passion. I was very passionate about this like little Zelda game. I guess Breath of the Wild is not a little Zelda game, but about this little aspect of Breath of the Wild that not a lot of people cared about at the time. And now here I am talking to a game developer and voice actors, and no, I completely sympathize with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it in a lot of ways, Arzette was like a miracle game that we were all just super happy that we even got to make. Like it was publisher backed and everything. Like not a lot of people get these opportunities, and just the fact that we had the opportunity to make this game and we got to make it the way that we wanted, and just really just everybody went all out, and I really think that it shows. The passion really comes through,
It really
and
does.
yeah, I'm proud of Arzette. It turned out much better. Even I knew it would turn out pretty good, but it turned out even better than that. So I'm feeling very good about it still.
Were there any like serious problems during production that you had to deal with, or?
No, no. We had obviously there's a few. Every project has stumbles. Like people that either
Oh,
just
every project has hiccups. Absolutely.
right that like there are things that needed to be corrected, or some people that we sort of had to reconfigure what was going on, and just things along those lines. But there is, as far as like serious issues, there really weren't any. So I'm very happy about that. I do have a background in project management, as lame as that sounds. So it was something I knew that
Oh
I
man.
was kind of up
That's not it.
to the
That's a
task of.
very needed. That's a very
Yeah,
needed background.
for a
Yeah.
situation like this, yeah.
So I've heard in the games industry. So I have heard. So
That's a
yeah,
lot
I
of
mean,
what people don't care about or sidestep, and that it's one of the more important aspects, being able to manage what you're creating. Like passion's important. I know I just had this whole thing about passion, but you also need to be able to guide that passion. So that's really important.
yeah, and I had a pretty clear vision for what I wanted to do, like very early on, which is another reason why Audie and I got along so well. Was like I was able to communicate like what I wanted to do, and pretty much plan out the game in exacting detail, like from the beginning, like how many what I wanted to do. I mean, I will say one thing that kind of went outside of what I expected were the cutscenes, because the number that we ended up with, because there's about 45 minutes of animation in the game, which is about double what I had originally planned for. So that was just sort of a result of the script getting a little bigger than it originally was planned to be. The voice actors having fun, and the animators just having more fun than what we sort of originally planned for. So that was like a pleasant surprise by the end, because definitely, you know, I worked really hard on the actual design of the game, and to that effect, I was able to work with John Linneman of Digital Foundry. He's been doing some more game consulting stuff lately, but he had wanted the opportunity to work on this type of game, like a 2D action platformer, and we became really good friends, and we agree, and he helped me a lot with level design. Uh, and so it's another reason why the levels, like the design, I think got it's really good, because I like collaboration. I like collaborating with others. I'm not very egotistical. Like probably the smallest ego to probably a distressing degree. And I really appreciate like collaborating with others and sort of like bouncing ideas, and um, sort of identifying like what's bad and what's not pretty early on. I'm not somebody who likes to excessively push what I want over and over and over again. I'm very open to doing what's best for like the design at hand or the game at hand. So he and I worked really well together on the level design. And just in general, it was just a really good collaboration across a lot of disciplines and people who just really wanted to make this stupid game the very best that it could be, because there was potential. There's potential in those Zelda CD-I games to be more than what they were, and it makes it sound like I'm on like some kind of like crusade when I talk about it sometimes, but it's really just righting some of the wrongs of the past when it comes to like as a game story sort of ending the way that you don't want it to end, right? Like, Arzette had all the support and resources that it needed to be the best that it could be. The Zelda CD-I games didn't get that chance, so like that's sort of taking that kind of design paradigm and seeing how that it could work. Obviously modernized with the proper modernizations, but
Of course.
seeing that it could thrive and work in the year of our Lord 2024 was really sort of like the goal.
That's honestly really amazing. And I know I keep saying this, but you really did knock it out of the park with that.
Thank you.
Like it's very clear that I'm sounding like a broken record at this point, honestly.
It's all good. It's all good.
Avi is a big fan.
Oh, well,
If that wasn't
so
clear by now, then yes, I am a big fan of Arzette, okay?
This is
I
Avi's dream
couldn't
come true.
tell. Oh, wowee.
goodness
Do
gracious.
you realize how much of an honor it is to talk to the man who made the game?
I believe it. I mean, I'm also sitting here, so I mean, I guess I'm not believing it. I'm living it, but
Yeah, I'm perceiving it.
Speaking of the game, though, I do need to ask,
Yeah.
how'd you come up with the story?
I'm very interested in this.
You said you wrote it yourself, and well, you wrote it. You had somebody co-write with you, obviously. But
Right.
like,
Yes.
how'd you come up with like the standard story? I mean, even the world itself. Like, how did you come up with all this stuff?
I'm very
Well,
interested in this question.
So really, the beginnings of the story, it was pretty bad. It was fan fiction to make to like not in a good way of like a third Zelda CD-I game, but after many iterations and a little confidence and also just some really good prodding from my co-writer Audie, it sort of like took on a shape of its own, which I'm really happy with. We decided I decided to sort of focus on the theme of breaking cycles and not repeating the past, which ties into sort of the development of the games themselves, right? Like, don't repeat the same mistakes, which is, I don't really know if I want to get into Arzette's story spoilers here, but, you know, um,
We can have a whole
I'll-
section dedicated to spoilers. I mean, we could just find a place to skip over that. I can mark it in the video too.
okay, how about I'm going to discuss some Arzette story spoilers starting now. Does that sound good?
All right, sure. Let's see. Whatever the timestamp is below, I'll put it in the video. Tune out for a little bit if you're still
I'll keep it brief. I'll keep it brief. So,
I've seen the whole game, so I'm good.
so
Zach, you
I
good?
knew.
Yeah, I've also seen the whole game, and I've played, I think at this point, more than half of it.
Okay.
Yeah, more than half of it.
All right, all right.
All right. So
right.
I knew from
I'll
the
take
very
care of it.
beginning. Okay, so I knew from the very beginning, like this was like early design doc stuff, that I was going to have to kill off the king. I knew that he had to die. I knew that there needed to be an actual like emotional core to Arzette's character arc. I knew that it was probably going to take some people by surprise, and some people don't like it. They don't like the tone shift. But it was important to me that the characters in Arzette, for as silly as they are, and as far as like coming up with the characters, a lot of them are childhood characters I'd come up with a long time ago that were reconfigured for this, or they're more recent stuff. My wife, Sonora, she's very good at coming up with names, and she's also just very silly. And so, like some characters and ideas that she had made it into the game as well. And she's again just very good at naming things. As far as the name Arzette, just very briefly, maybe too much information, but that was just a shower thought. I was just going over some names, and Arzette was one that popped up in my head, and I was like, yeah, it sounds good. I was just go, as you do,
That's the
like,
story
sort of
behind the
like
name of
That
Arzette.
divine inspiration.
Right. You just sort of mouth things like, oh, no, yep, Arzette. Sounds good to me.
Hey,
You know,
sometimes you get your best thoughts in the shower. It works.
exactly. And I just sort of like looked it up, and then you do the thing where you stare at it for long enough, and you're like, is this what I'm going with? And then you get embarrassed because you say it too much, or you go into pitch meetings with it, but then you start becoming confident with it. But anyway, um, going back to like the characters in Arzette they had to be written in a way to where, yeah, they're a little crazy, they're a little weird. The maybe the denizens of Faramore aren't okay. We can just say that. But they don't know that. They don't know that anything is strange in their world. Um, Arzette's a little more grounded, so sometimes she'll like react to the characters in a way that the audience can identify with, which I think really helps. Like for instance, we have a horseman named Clive. He has a horse head. He's a horseman. He does not
Love
know
them.
he does not know that he is a horseman. And so unfortunately he makes a lot of horse puns, even though he has no idea that he's a horseman. So Arzette laughs at him. So he's just mad at her because she's laughing at him. He does not know that she's laughing at him because he keeps making horse puns. So like that's an example of like the sort of like writing style that I wanted to go with, right? Like Arzette has to be earnest and kind and caring, and yes, as Audie says in our art book, I did put a little bit of my wife into her because, yeah. And she also talks a lot like me. Anyone who knows me is like, she keeps saying I appreciate it a lot. I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, Um, but just sort of grounding her, making her kind, empathetic, but also, um, giving her that challenge of, well, how does she meet the challenge of doing what's best for her kingdom after her father is dead? And there's this threat that happened because people were complacent and they keep making the same damn mistakes over and over again. What's she going to do about that? And some of that personality type comes from you know the original Zelda CD-I games and how Zelda behaved. Like there's the good infamous like scene where like you killed
Right.
me, good, right? And I
Good.
found that very I kind of wanted to explore that. Like I wanted to be like, what would cause someone to be like that? And so that's sort of Arzette's personality type. She cares about her kingdom, but she is not afraid. She has no moral quandaries with having to kill someone to ensure that the greater good is served. And that's instead of making the same mistakes and just trapping this dude in a book again, she's not going to do that. She's going to ensure peace by killing Dimer for good, using So I,
But
I
then
really
that
wanted to explore that, and there's some implications behind that mindset, that I would like to explore in the future. Like
well, that
what
also works to her. That also works to her detriment as well, because you know this whole age-old tradition of Dimer being sealed away by the Jewel of Faramore is what they've been going through for a while, right? I mean, it's kind of
right,
standard at this point. Arzette broke that tradition whenever she powered up her blade with a single piece of the Jewel of Faramore and then used the rest of it to create the purple magic.
right,
And I get
exactly,
that she did it with the best intentions, but with how the Jewel of Faramore is seen as a holy relic, she's limiting it to just like one use, like that being her sword and her magic. So I don't know if the Jewel of Faramore had any other properties to it that
Oh,
could
well,
like
we'll maybe talk about that in a future game if we get to
in,
make a future
in the
game.
future.
Right.
Well, you've already kind of led it into it with the stinger at the very end, so I would hope
Right.
there's a future game. And with
Yes.
the resounding success that Arzette has seen,
I don't think we've seen the last of Arzette. No, absolutely not.
I would
But
absolutely
I'm
hope
very
not.
excited about that prospect.
um, but there's some ideas we want to explore from that kind of worldview. And the best part about this, I'm very glad you guys are engaging with this seriously, was because I engaged with this very deathly seriously. Which for something that is this type of project, people will be like, you serious? Yes. Like when I set out to write this game, like I wrote it. Like I wasn't. I didn't take any like shortcuts or whatever. I tried to consider like every single like possible story permutation
I feel that
for
at a
this
very
game.
hard level.
Like so yeah, like that's basically how I wrote the game, was the theme of breaking cycles, and like the consequences of that. For now they're good, but that's sort of how I wanted to go about it. And just all the characters are weird, to say the least. But Arzette doesn't judge them. She doesn't. I mean, maybe she's a little like eye rolly sometimes, but she doesn't like. She cares for everybody, and nobody knows that they're weird. Like it's not something that's like pointed out. The game doesn't want to, because that would have just been awful, right? Like nobody wants to play a game that thinks that it's a joke. Like that's terrible.
Right.
Like that's a exercise in frustration
It almost
and
kind of
really
breaks the
annoying.
immersion as well.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
characters are eccentric, but they're like endearingly eccentric, and that's what makes a lot of them memorable for me.
Exactly. Like it was when coming up with the list of characters, I obviously coming from a game designer perspective, all of them had a game design purpose first, and then after that, I decided to sort of like determine like what they needed to be, and what their what their eccentricness was going to be. Like it was a lot of fun to come up with the concepts for all the characters, to be like, and this person, and this is going to be a speed demon creature, purple freak, who likes to go fast on sand because that's his existence, and trying to come up with like you know reasons for why he would be there, like his like the arc that he go, like what happens to him and all that kind of stuff. It was so much fun to try to like put that stuff together. And then when the illustrators got their hands on the characters and started like you know making them into fully fleshed characters that would be animated, it was also just so much fun. um it was very gratifying to see a lot of, because almost all the artists that were illustrators, save like a couple, are like longtime friends of mine. So they know my very, very stupid sense of humor. So when I would say things like, yeah, it's a scarecrow who can't move and his name is Cornrad, they will be like, I know exactly what you want to do. I'm going to illustrate this guy now. Instead of being like, Cornrad, are you okay? What? Why? How did he get there? And it's like, don't worry about it. We'll talk about that later. It's fine.
Cornrad
No,
has to
no.
be one of my favorites, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. How did he get up there? He can't move, so he was also in the prologue.
Just
But
the sheer
he's
concept.
yeah, yeah. Dimer retains only the very best minions,
Oh, absolutely.
the most useful minions possible to do his bidding. So yeah, it was so much fun to come up with all the different characters and sort of uh, yeah
Speaking of
explore their
characters,
eccentricness. Yeah,
which would you say is your favorite?
I can't play favorites. I mean, my immediate
You can't?
favorite is Arzette, just because Arzette as a design and as a character is pretty much like almost every like character that I've like come up with since I was a kid. And just seeing like her fully realized and illustrated by my friend, Gabe, it's just been awesome, really. And to see people really take to her and like her personality, which it's awesome. So probably Arzette. Second favorite, Dale. I love that guy. He's I love him. I love bards in general
Yeah.
in any media. So he's just he's a lot of fun. It's
I
a
was
lot of
gonna
fun to
say
write.
outside of Arzette, who would you pick? But Dale's a strong contender.
Oh yeah, I love that guy.
He just oozes that whole, like, this guy over here.
right, like why is he there? Like sort of thing.
Another fun adventure for me to stay out of.
Right, like why is this guy here? But you know, everybody has everybody's there for a reason. So
Do you have a least favorite character?
least favorite character. I mean,
Like one who
New
maybe
De-
wasn't fully realized, or just something about him kind of irks you a little bit, or
I don't think so. I mean, Duke Nodelki's a real son of a bitch, but other than that, he's great. But boy, he's a
that is
real
fair.
asshole, isn't he? He's
Oh yeah,
he was fun
screw
to write.
screw Nodelki.
He was fun. I wanted to write a character that was like we see a lot of redeemed villains nowadays, which is fine. It's fine. I like a good redeemed villain there. But there really hasn't been one where it's like, yeah, this guy is making all the wrong decisions, and yeah, no, he's not redeemable. He's gonna get murdered. Like it was fun to really like write a character like that. Just a real, he's a bad guy because he wanted those riches and stuff. Like all those things.
I
But
felt
you
that
have
too.
to.
I like writing this crazy, this guy is just straight evil dude.
You don't really see a whole lot. Sorry, I stumbled over my tongue there for a second. Gotta drink some water. Stay hydrated.
Hydrate, Tavi. Preach. Do what you preach.
You were lacking on your hydration.
I'm sorry. Okay. But yeah, you don't see a whole lot of that anymore nowadays, because a lot of people seem to like the whole, redeeming the villain sort of thing. But sometimes you just need people to be assholes. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and
Sometimes there is no redemption.
and Dimer is some of that as well. Like, it was fun because one of his like lines, he's like, like, why are you evil? And he goes, why not? That was sort of like an in joke
Why not?
because one of my friends, it's been a long time in joke between me and my friends about like some like evil villain character. It'd be like, why are you doing this to me? And he's like, oh, why not?
Fuck it.
Because it's
So
fun.
it was yeah, exactly. So it was fun to again just in total. Arzette was just so fun, like as a production to sort of like realize so many of my ideas and a lot of the artists' creative ideas and the writer, and Audie's creative ideas. Like he's responsible for the Alvin the Moose, which he's another one of my favorite characters. I love him. And it's a character Audie came up with when he was like 13, so it was a long time coming for him to finally
Oh,
get
the
to
implications
put
of the moose.
yes, to put a loincloth moose into a video game. It was pretty much his dream. So I was happy. I was happy he was finally able to do that. And I mean, I think his scenes are one of his scenes is probably one of the funniest in the game. So I'm happy that turned out well.
Oh, the mooses?
Yeah, if you do his trade quest, finish
Yeah,
his
yeah.
blacksmithing
That's
quest. Yeah,
yeah.
it's good stuff.
Yeah. That's all I'll say about that.
The ESRB had to watch every moment of that. So
Careful there,
to the
Icarus, flying a little too close to the sun.
shout out to the ESRB. Love you.
Let's talk about the voice work, the casting process, actually.
Sure.
And this is one that I'm particularly interested in because this podcast isn't just, the podcast standalone by itself. She and I actually created a group about maybe 8-9 years ago. And we have a whole bunch of voice actors and, video editors, people who make stuff, artists, just in our ranks.
Sure.
That's where I come from.
Exactly. Zach here is actually the voice of Link in a comic that we're doing it's called Zelda comic, done by Mario Panaghetti, clear back in 2002. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. But
I don't think I'm familiar, but that's awesome.
Yeah, he's the voice for Link, and he draws heavy inspiration from Jeffrey Rath's version of Link.
Very, very heavy inspiration.
Yes.
A lot of love in that. I think there's a.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Bust out a quote there real quick, Zach.
Just a CDI,
Just
or are we
straight
doing?
up CD-I Link.
Okay, great. I'll grab my stuff.
Good, very good.
It pales in comparison to the OG, but I hope
Like
it's
we
a
say, the
decent
Wish.com
imitation.
version of it.
Yeah, there's no shame in being Wish.com.
But
So
that's just to a finer point. Like, we're really interested in the whole vocal sort of process, I guess, when it comes to that. So,
yeah,
jumping into the questions here, what was the casting process like for all the characters in the game, legacy and otherwise?
yeah. So we professionally casted Arzette. We knew from the beginning that there's some roles that friends and family were going to do. Quite a few actually, including me. I do a voice. Um, and my wife does a voice. A lot of my friends do a voice. Audie does a voice. He does the grunts for Alvin. Uh, fun fact. He's very dedicated to the character, as you know.
Right.
And I knew that I wanted to involve the legacy Zelda CD-I staff. Probably should have talked about that earlier, but that was
We'll
also
get
one of
into
the
that here in a
things.
little bit.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that I knew that I wanted to do to make sure that people knew that it was a loving homage and not a parody, was to involve them. So there's some, but for the most part, every role was pretty much professionally cast. We asked some of our friends like Modern Vintage Gamer, works at Limited Run, to do a voice, and a few other people like that. Vinny Vine Sauce does do a voice. He became involved because we actually we had revealed the game, and he reached out and was like, "Is there anything I can do?" And as fate would have it, we had not been able to record the role of Fritch. It was supposed to be voiced by somebody who dropped out, and then their replacement dropped out, and so we were having some trouble getting this voice role filled. And so he just came at the right time, right place, right time. So I was like, "Yes, actually, there's a role for you if you would like it." And so that's sort of how that happened.
Cool.
But yeah, we just um, I got hooked up with Studio Coattails through Audie because they do a lot of visual novels, and I got to meet the casting director and uh, voice director Scion, who owns that company, and yeah, we just worked together, put out a casting call, and we just listened to all the auditions and uh, just went from there, like your standard, pretty much like professional recording setup. Like they recorded, we got all that taken care of, and then for the legacy staff, and we'll again get into that later. We had sort of agreed on everything, like what they were going to be doing, and so I rented out a studio and directed them from there. And yeah, I mean, it's your pretty standard voice recording process. Like you give them direction, they have like a script, and well, had a lot of fun. And yeah,
Of
I sat in for every session, and I answered questions as needed, or like if I needed like additional like performance notes, I would give them. Um, Sort of learned how to voice record along with sort of or voice direct with Science like guidance. And we sort of we just kind of hashed it out, and we did the same for all like the guest roles and everything as well. Had to put it all together. He also did a lot of the engineering for the sound as well, which was a huge challenge considering that other than the legacy staff, everyone used their own home studio. So just trying to get all that like situated is a pretty daunting task considering the number of characters and voice lines in the game.
I would assume so,
Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, that's pretty much how it happened. It was a ton of fun. Some of the most fun. Listening to all the auditions was amazing. It was,
So did you guys have like a proper casting call, or was it more like
yes.
spot casting? Okay, all right.
No, it was a casting call. Yeah.
I mean, at the very least, you have a lot of people who are willing to pitch in and sort of help with that sort of stuff too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, working on Studio Coattails is great. Like they knew what the project was. They knew that it was going to be this Zelda CDI style game, like what the direction needed to be. Like that was really important, and obviously it's why I sat in on all the recording sessions to make sure that you know the voice work was just right. Right, like we wanted it to be good while not being like we wanted Saturday morning cartoon is what we wanted, and that's what we got.
Right.
So it was awesome. Especially like I have a fun little anecdote from when we recorded Dale's lines. So Dale was voiced by Brandon Acosta, which is one of my really long time internet friends, and it's been awesome to see him become a professional voice actor. He's been in a ton of stuff, and to be able to sort of like reconnect and have him do this game it was amazing. But he had done some fan dubs for Zelda Universe before, for like the CDI Zelda games, and he had voiced Link. So yeah, he was definitely on the
Yeah.
short list, even if he wasn't my friend. But
Fair enough. Fair enough.
he one of the notes that he would get from Sion, our director, casting director, was be more annoying, more annoying. It was very funny. Like
More
just have
annoying.
yes, more annoying, more annoying, and like it took a little bit to get to the point where we have Dale. Uh, to get to that crescendo of where we needed him to be, which is well, I mean, I love Dale. I think we all know Dale's deal at this point. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as far as like the side characters go and everything, did you already have like specific voices in your head for these characters, or did it just kind of come up during
yeah,
the process?
yeah, no, I had an idea of like what kind of voice. Yeah, because that's part of it when you put out the casting calls. The voices that I wanted professionally voiced. I had a voice and a like type of person in mind. And that's really where Cyan can sort of step in and be like, yeah, I've worked with this person, I've worked with this person, I know like who to look out for, or or a really good audition comes in and it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for. We had a lot of really good Arzettes, but I think Angel really like knocked it out of the park. She was
Absolutely.
exactly what we needed, and yeah, no, she was phenomenal, and she definitely had to do the most work, and just her professionalism and ability to be really like flexible. She did so good. She had a lot of really hard scenes. She had to cry, right, and laugh, and
Right.
also do a lot of other efforts. So she did really really good. There was a point during recording where Scion realized the Count Denny joke, and that was another one of my favorite moments. She was recording like the Count Denny, aren't you a vampire? Line over and over, and he was like, "Oh my God, is it Denny's like the breakfast chain?" And he just laughed for like 5 minutes straight. It was very very funny.
Oh, Denny's son of a. Okay.
Yeah, he loves breakfast. So
Why did I never put that together?
it's alleged, right? Like he there might not be a Denny's. Who knows? But no, that's
Maybe. Who knows? Who knows? I do have a side question, I guess, kind of running
sure.
alongside that. The voice of Rudy.
Uh-huh.
What's up with that? Because I've seen people saying he sounds like he recorded in a box, or like the quality was a little off. I like no disrespect at all. I just want to know the story behind that.
So Rudy was voiced by Joe Modzgaleski, who is a development lead producer at Limited Run Games, and he was my development producer for Arzette. We're very good friends. Even before I started working with Limited Run, he had streamed my Zelda CD-I remasters, and that's how we met each other. And it was just a really funny, sort of cosmic coincidence that we got to work with each other professionally to make Arzette and do all the console versions. And the more technical stuff is what he handles. So it was really awesome. I got to work with him, and so I wanted to make sure that he had a role in the game. And I love you, Joe. If you're listening, you definitely are a Rat Man. So that was a perfect role for him. Um, his deal is that his mic was not configured right, or something else was going on. Thankfully, Rudy's scene takes place in a cave, so I was able to put some.
It kind of helps.
Right, so I was able to sort of put some post-process effects on it that I was wanting to do anyway, to sort of smooth it over. But I mean, yes, that's Rudy's deal. Was the
Right, and
recording?
I don't mean any disrespect by it either. I mean, I
Right.
love Rudy as a character. I'm just kind of wondering what's up with that, you know?
Yeah, so Rudy's deal was that we didn't have time to re-record because of the production schedule, and that
Got
was the
it.
recording we had. So
All right. Well, hey, I mean, that's cool. That's a story behind, one of the mysteries of the game, I should say. Still sticking with the voice actor train though. So without going into specific details,
sure.
how in the world were you able to get a hold of the original Link and Zelda?
So this is a story that I will probably write out in really great detail at some point or tell elsewhere, but I'll keep it very brief here. I have a background, obviously. I've said this like 20 times, like business related things. And part of that was part of my job responsibilities was reaching out to people whose contact information was not readily available using publicly available resources, right? So I'm very good at tracking people down, is what I'll say, and reaching out to them. So that's what I did. I knew from the beginning that I wanted to involve the legacy staff in some way or the other. And also just for my own curiosity, I wanted to, find out as much as possible. Adi supported this from the beginning, my producer. He sort of understood. Of course, he was very wise in being correct that we don't want to do too much. We want to do just enough so that we acknowledge, them while also not, like trying to make it um, too much is all I'll say. But um, yeah, I was able to email them. Bonnie Jean Wilbur, who was the voice of Zelda and the CD-I games, and Jeffrey Rath, who's the voice of Link in CD-I games. I was also able to reach out to Rob Dunlavey, but as the original background artist for the Zelda CD-I games, he also did artwork for Arzette. That's separate from voice stuff, but same
Love the.
idea.
I still love the background art for Arzette. It looks very nice.
Oh, he's incredible.
He-
Obviously, the background art was done by a team, pretty large team of painters. But yeah, he was on that team. But anyway, so I formulated, you know, I pitched my idea. I said, hey, I'm not insane, I'm not a crazy person. I know it's been 30 years, and you're getting an email like this, but you know, um, I want to make an homage to your work, and I would very much like to, discuss having you involved, like as voice artist, whatever, And I just sort of tried to make it very clear that this was not like malicious, and that I was coming at it from a place of love, because I am, and just really outline what I wanted to do, and they were pretty much immediately on board. Obviously, I know at least Jeffrey was skeptical at first because Jeffrey is very aware of the game's reputations. He'll go more into detail. We have some interviews with them in the collector's edition art book, so you can sort of read some of their thoughts there. But um, he knew of the negative reputation, and he thought like maybe he was being trolled, right? Like they're all like aware of it
right.
to an extent. Um, but no, he figured it out pretty quickly because after we got in touch, we had some Zoom meetings and stuff, and started to get to know each other, and just really pitched the idea, and they were on board. They knew, just like how everyone else knows right now, that there was passion going into these games, into this game, and yeah, that they totally wanted to be on board and get involved, and contribute, which was amazing. I think one of the most surreal moments of my life was putting together the recording session that they did for the game, and seeing them come back. And for Bonnie Jean, her natural speaking voice is pretty much Zelda, so it doesn't require a lot for her. For Jeffrey, he has to really reach back to find the character again, and also like he has to do something to his voice to get it to sound like how Link does. And he does it in that panel that he was at PAX this past weekend. So you should listen.
Definitely, especially
It's a lot
since
of
there's
fun.
a video for it too.
Right. But yeah, no, it just involved really just pitching the idea to them and just, them understanding what the project was to me, and they understood that, yeah, and it's very true that their work means a lot to me. Like it affected me pretty greatly. So, they all like understood that and they were really happy to be involved, and it was great.
I wonder if that also made them feel better about having created it. Like, you feel like you get a lot of backlash in the last, not backlash, but you're kind of made that thing that they made is kind of made out to be a joke, and it's like,
Mhm.
well, gotta put that behind me. I made that. And then, like, what, 30 years later, you find out that you actually do have, like, some fans that wants you to work on this. Like, that's probably got to be almost like
They
surreal.
were Yeah, they were very happy during this autograph signing and meeting people, and uh yeah, like it was a really nice moment, I think, for them.
Well,
So
hindsight's always 2020 as well. Like, it's very easy to see something as like, garbage whenever it first comes out, but then enough time passes where you're like, you know, it's still not good, but you have to appreciate the effort that was made to put into it. And it's popular with a certain audience. There are people who absolutely love the Zelda CD-I games, people who love Jeffrey Rath's performance as Link, people who love Bonnie Jean Wilbur's performance as Zelda. There are people who legit love these characters, this game.
mhm. Yeah,
And
and
like
it was great.
it absolutely has a cult following. That
Mhm.
that can't be misconstrued in any other sense of the word, especially the YouTube poop community. I know I keep going back to that, but you know. I guess a bit of a follow-up question to that would be, were there any other legacy staff you wanted to get on?
So I approached, and I'll go more in depth in this and separate something I plan on writing.
Right,
But
just a real quick thing. You don't have to go
yeah,
in too in
yes,
depth
I
here.
talked to pretty much everybody that could be talked to. I'll say that. And no, Morshu is never going to be findable. I'll just say that as well. I said that in the
Damn.
panel. It's just not possible. I have there were probably two people on the planet that could tell me who his voice over artist could be. One of them was Dale Descharon, who unfortunately has passed away, and another individual who I'll go into some other time, but just no response. So it's not possible, because just in the briefest of terms, the way that those games were recorded was the way that you would think. They all got into a booth next to the programmers, Zelda CD-I programmers. It wasn't anything fancy, and they just got into a booth. They recorded. Now Jeffrey and Bonnie Jean are friends. They've known each other for a long time, because a lot of them are part of like their local like theater community. That's where a lot of them come from, right?
Fair enough. Fair
Um,
enough.
so they know each other, but for the most part, they none of them knew each other, and they all got in, recorded all their lines, and left. So they're not going to know who voiced like Morshu, right? Like that's just not something that, if they could even remember, like they wouldn't know, because they probably wouldn't even have been there on the same day. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of it. But yes, I did reach out to as many people as possible, and I think for Arzette specifically, I think having, you know Jeffrey and Bonnie Jean involved was very like important to me, and I'm glad I was able to do that.
I'm sure that boosted up the game's sales as well. Getting the legacy staff on.
Well, I don't know if it. I don't know about that, but I do know that for me personally, it was, again, important just to show that I'm not messing around, right? Like this is a spiritual successor. Like I want it to be genuine. Like I want it to be clear that I do care, and I care enough to put in the time and effort to involve the legacy staff, because I think that they kind of what was discussed earlier. Like they deserve to sort of see that their work was appreciated. Maybe not in the way that they wanted or anybody wanted it to, but it was appreciated by a cool audience, and that I wanted to give them the chance to sort of reach back out to that audience, and so their work could be seen again.
And I wholeheartedly believe that you did.
Thank you.
Will we see them again in future projects?
I can't comment on that right now.
All right,
I would
fair enough.
certainly
Fair
love.
enough.
I would certainly love to work with them again. They were very lovely.
Well, at the very least, there's that. Okay, so we're in our final 4 questions here. So
Okay.
we can wrap this up pretty quickly.
All right. I'll
A couple
get
of
to
them
this.
I wanted to save until the end, and a couple I just didn't have a place to kind of worm in there, so that's what we're doing here.
Sure.
First question: were there any other characters that were planned to be playable during the process, or maybe later down the line in a sequel?
Yes and no. I kind of I'll save it for the art book, but I will say that the tutorial was going to be different originally. But as far as like having additional playable characters or unlockable characters, no, it was always planned to be one, just for production constraints and everything like that.
Could we see that going forward?
I can't comment on that at this time.
All right, fair enough. Looking back, is there anything you wish that you could have added to Arzette, or do you think it's good as it is, or is there something that you wish you could have changed?
I'm very, very satisfied with how Arzette ended up as a whole. Any artist, any game developer who tells you that they're totally satisfied is lying. They're absolutely lying to you through their teeth. So yeah, of course, there's things that I wish that I could have done or that I could have implemented or made better, or, anything like that. But I think, I had a very realistic outset for Arzette. I had a production schedule, like I knew the limitations of the project, which there weren't very many. I'm very, very lucky. I was more or less able to make exactly the game that I wanted to make. But yeah, of course, there are things that I could wish I could do uh, more of, I guess you could say. But overall, I am intensely satisfied with how Arzette ended up. It's shipped, it's
As you should
done,
be.
and I'm very, very happy with it. And I'm not going back and patching it a ton. Like I have one final patch planned, as I've alluded to on my Discord server and a few other places. But there's no like content changes and stuff. It's just very minor bug fixes. Like my goal for the project was to ship in a state that I would consider like cartridge complete. Like if this was like an old game, which that's obviously the style of game Arzette's going for, right? This was like a
Right.
retro style game that if 1.0 was the version that was the forever version and I wasn't able to patch it, I would be happy with it. And I am. I mean, obviously there are bugs and stuff that I've fixed in patches since, but I've tried my very best not to alter content or add content. It's very, very minor things. Um, yeah, because I think Arzette exists the way that it is, and I'm very happy with it, and it's how it will continue to exist. So yeah.
As we've discussed before, it's hinted that Arzette's adventures will continue. Is there anything that you would like to share with the audience about what's to come for our favorite Princess of Faramore?
I think,
Or is it all strictly no comment?
well, I will say, please buy Arzette, the Jewel of Faramore on your preferred platform if you would like to see more Arzette. I will say
Or
that.
all of them, just every platform.
Sure, go for it, please. It's
Have a collection. Is that what you've done,
Yeah.
Avi? Do you have every single version of it?
No.
Do you want
Shut
every single
up.
version of it?
I made I made every console version, so that's true support right there.
Come on, Avi. Be a true fan. Get them all. Pokemon card it.
I still
So,
get
yeah.
the Steam version so I can get those cards, okay?
But yeah, Yeah, support the game if you want to see more Arzette. Obviously, I would love to do another one, and I have lots of really big ideas. And I would love to do it. But yeah, just support the game, and I hope to continue Arzette's adventures in the future.
And one final question for you, probably the most important question out of this entire interview.
Okay. Yep.
Will Arzette and the baker ever go out for coffee?
Now that is something I would love to see in the future. I don't want to say one way or the other right now, but boy, wouldn't that be nice? It'd be really nice, wouldn't it, if that happened?
Would be nice.
It would be
That
it
would
would
be
be
nice.
fantastic. I would love to see that. But yeah,
I would
we'll
absolutely love to see that.
we'll leave that there for now.
Very well. Okay. Zach, Ken, do you have any other questions that you want to toss out there?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
It was really fun to do this. It's crazy to be able to speak to a developer when we were starting this podcast, and Avi came to us before even episode 1 was recorded and was like, "Hey, guess what?" I was like, "Oh
What's
wow,
up, guys?"
okay, so this is crazy." So, who would have thought that we would have got this far after technically not even recording an episode? But this was really fun. It was a crazy experience. It's really cool to be able to speak to a game developer and to hear the stories that you were telling. You can almost put to the projects that we're working on and stuff, and to know like, hey, we're on the right track. It feels good. It feels really good. It was really fun.
Zach, you got anything?
I think everything's already been said. This is like the first like major like developer or just any cool person interview that I've ever been a part of.
Oh, I'm sorry about
Um,
that. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I will
I'm-
not lie. I did take a little bit of a risk just straight up messaging you and being like, hey, you want to come in on for a podcast that's barely got anything going with it? I mean, the worst you could say is no, obviously, but I just
it's been a ton of fun. Go on, Zach. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
oh no, you're fine. I just enjoy the game. I enjoy the authenticity of the game. Some of the characters are hilarious, and the gameplay. I'm not very good at playing games, which is probably why I'm only a little over halfway through it. But it sort of scratches it scratches like a nostalgic itch, and it just thank you for making a genuine, heartfelt, made with love product that for fans of the CD-I games and just fans of how games used to be in general to enjoy. So
Of course.
thank you.
Thank you so much for playing. I really appreciate that. That means a lot. Arzette's definitely a mixture of not just the Zelda CD-I games being a spiritual successor, but it's a mix of a lot of games that I love. So I pull my inspirations from everywhere, books, games, wherever. So it means a lot to hear you say that. So thank you.
all right. I believe that wraps everything up. Zach, do you want to hit us with an Arzette quote to
An
close us out?
Yes. Again, all my love to Jeffrey Raff, fantastic voice actor. I honestly do think that the voice that he did for Link, even though it's memed on, is sort of the voice that I automatically think of when it comes to like an upbeat, peppy kind of like young in his step kind of Link. So with that in mind, I have to do a line that he did. My work is pretty grave, but that doesn't mean I can't groove in my bone suede shoes. How's that?
Oh, that's good. Love that.
I love it. I love it, man. All right. Once again, thank you so much, Dopply, for joining us on what is officially episode 2 of our podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you to everyone who is listening. And with that, we are out.